That's a big one. And then they're number one in scoring with the short field of anyone. So I was like going through BCF toys this week and just going through all that different stuff. I'm like, oh, so if Georgia gives them some short fields, like Stetson has a bad fumble or they get the bad punting night, that changes things. Maybe that's why Tennessee never punted, because Paxton Brooks was quietly just a dumpster fire this year. That was like one of the under talked about things when they're punting. I'm like, never punt. I don't know what happened to Paxton this year, but like never punt for Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, Connor, Joe Milton, like I was on Tennessee's 1-10 games this year. I said before the season, I was like, I would be surprised if Tennessee does not win 10 games with Hendon Hooker, a fully healthy Hendon Hooker. And part of that was Tennessee was the only team who finished with the top 10 offense last year in the Power 5 that did not win 10 games. You went up and down the list, the only one. And the defense, the linebacking play, like all across the board was just not good enough for them to win 10 games. This year, I was like, the defense isn't going to be great, but they're going to be good at something. And the run defense was really good all season long. And they figured that out. The pass defense just got obliterated with injuries and everything else. But the linebacker play was better. Aaron Beasley was a lot better. Jeremy Banks was really good off the edge. They found something with him. Pressure-wise, Joshua Joseph was great. And we'll see what he looks like. Techie West looks like he's going to be a really good player on the inside. Like, there's a lot of dudes coming in. David Bradley, like, look, you don't have to... You know all the talent coming in this class, Connor. But when you look at Tennessee and Joe Milton on Friday, I've been asked a lot this week about like what I expect. I'm like, I have no idea. Like Jalen Hyatt's not playing, Cedric Tillman's not playing, Darnell's not playing, Jeremy Banks is not playing. I have no idea. It's a homecoming for Joe, but I think people might be putting a little bit too much stock into how he plays, whether or not he wins. Like if he's the guy going forward, I think the momentum stuff is overblown. I'm like, that's not going to decide if he or Nico is starting week 1, or even Taven Jackson, who's still in the fold. It's going to be the spring. It's going to be the summer. It's going to be a neck and neck battle, and there are other factors influencing how that competition is going to go, I would guess. But I am curious to see if he hits. Like, he has to hit on some of these deep balls. They were not hitting in the Vanderbilt game. Part of it, you could say, conditions. It was pretty horrible, rainy, all that kind of stuff. But, like, he was still sailing those. And that is something that people undervalued about Hooker, is just that, like, he didn't have the arm strength that Milton does.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. But he puts so much air under those deep balls, and they were right where they needed to be. They were always in the breadbasket. He was so good at targeting defenders in a way that, like, they just had to either draw a flag for pass interference or just give it up to Hyatt or Tillman or whoever it was on the outside. Milton has never shown that. And I still, like, I'm like, I don't know. I'm still betting against it. We have a little bit, like, it's just everyone is rooting for Joe Milton to break through, and I hope he is great on Friday. I just don't know. I have my doubts. I picked Tennessee to win, but like quietly, I just don't think Tennessee is beating Clemson on Friday. Where are you at with Milton and the future of those Tennessee Volunteers right now?
Oh boy, where do we start? Okay. I don't think Tennessee wins this football game.
Yeah.
And it is rooted in my belief that Joe Milton, in this stage of his career, probably with what we've seen so far and the systems that he has played in, isn't all of a sudden going to figure it out. And those listening to this are probably going to say, well, Hendon Hooker figured it out when he was 24 years old. I'd argue it kind of figured it out when he was 23, and the way that the offense looked last year. But I remember, even talking to Tavion Robinson, the Kentucky receiver who played with Hendon at Virginia Tech. And one of the things that Tavion said was they let Hendon be Hendon. And that scheme ended up being something that nobody would have necessarily expected him to play in when he was at Virginia Tech, but it ends up being exactly what Hendon needed. I don't know that there's a scheme for Joe Milton. I truly don't. And I say that as somebody who, look, and I don't know that we can call it a homecoming because, like, he's from Orlando. It's in Miami. Like,
I think it's like 45 minutes away.
No,
is what I read.
Not.
Is it not?
Well,
I read 45 minutes, or maybe family and friends are living 45 minutes away. Yeah,
that could be. But he didn't go to high school 45. Like, that's like a 3.5 hour drive. But that's okay. That's irrelevant. That's just Orlando in me.
Yeah.
But what's frustrating about Joe Milton is that you hear these comments from Josh Heupel, and you hear all these comments about, he's really progressing. And I think he should be embraced for staying at Tennessee and being willing to develop into the scheme, not leave when Hendon takes over as the guy. We're seeing guys in the NFL right now who, Marcus Mariota, Derek Carr, the second they get benched, they just leave. They just decide, I'm not with it. Joe Milton deserves immense credit for that. Him being the guy, I have no faith in. I don't. I think you need to be more accurate than he is. If he balls out against Clemson, that would be a pleasant surprise. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think there is any more pressure on any other player outside of in like a non-playoff game than there is on Joe Milton. I think there's a ton of pressure on him, and I think he knows it. I
Mm-hmm.
really do, because if he doesn't play well, you have to seriously consider, if you're Tennessee, what the portal looks like.
Yep.
That's the way college football works. I said Sam Hartman would look great in a Tennessee uniform. I know the projection was to Notre Dame. Pete Thamel had that like immediately. I also wonder if that kind of raises the price a little bit, if that's why you say something like that. And then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, set the bar for Alabama and Tennessee to come in and start the bidding war and all that. But I don't have faith in Joe Milton just because I've seen a lot of him. And that even goes back to the Michigan stuff. But I think Josh Heupel has this fascination with Joe Milton dating back to when he recruited him, when Josh Heupel was at UCF. And this belief that I can mold this guy, this unbelievable piece of clay that Joe Milton is. I can mold him into the perfect fit in my scheme, and something that we haven't necessarily seen at this freakish level, all the things that Joe Milton does so well. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that I am down on Joe Milton. I'm here for the Joe Milton experience. I'd love to see him throw a football 110 yards, just like that poor Orange who died a painful death. But I think that if you're hoping that he's going to be Hendon Hooker 2.0, I would very much suggest that that's probably not going to be in the cards.
I don't think it's going to be Hartman, but I do think, because Spencer Sanders is not committed yet, correct? He is not.
Correct.
Yeah.
Last I saw.
My gut is that Spencer's waiting on the Milton game, where I think he checks a lot of boxes for Tennessee next year. I think he's someone who would be more likely, because they want guys to be mobile. They want guys to move around. Joe, the weird thing too, Hendon moves around so much more than Joe. Like he was using his feet a lot more. I don't know why Joe doesn't. He's a much bigger player and he's much more physically imposing. And I mean, it was the Tennessee Tech game where he trucked a couple dudes in between, but it's like it's Tennessee Tech. He hasn't shown that he'll do that against the Clemsons of the world. And like you, I just don't think the deep ball is ever coming for him. I don't think he's ever going to be throwing it in a way where he's not taking his receivers' heads off over the middle. I don't think that's ever coming, unfortunately. And like that's the crappy part, is you don't want to just poo-poo this guy who has done the right thing by staying with this program and really committing to Heupel's scheme and playing behind Hendon. He's just been like the consummate pro and teammate. Like he's just so easy to root for, and has just been so close with Hendon and has been great for Hendon. And you're like, everyone here in Knoxville wants to see him flourish. And we all have in the back of our mind, it's like, I don't think it's going to happen. And it's uncomfortable because you don't want to be right about this. No one in Tennessee wants to be right that it's not going to work for Joe ever.
Can I ask you this question?
Yeah.
So with Hartman, the mobility thing, it would be different, obviously, than Hendon. There are quarterbacks in the portal, Spencer Sanders being one of them, who are certainly more mobile than Sam Hartman. When I close my eyes, though, and I picture him in this offense, I don't necessarily worry about that element so much. I picture how he is more willing than anybody in college football that I've seen in recent memory to hold the football at the mesh point and stare at those safeties over the top and think, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And in Josh Heupel's scheme and the way that he is recruiting receivers and the way that they have developed, that to me just feels like such a great combination for somebody who, just casually broke the all-time ACC career touchdown pass record.
Yeah.
And to get him in that scheme, I bring that up because I would say, if somebody like that is available, as opposed to the unknown of a Taven Jackson, and obviously Nico, I think he's got to be able to put on some weight. I talked about this with Trey Wallace, but we've both kind of been in agreement. Like if your design is for your true freshman to be your starter from day one, to me, that's a problem. I've talked about that with Florida, with the Rashada thing, and how I don't think that's the ideal formula. But if you can get a guy like that, and you just build your scheme around his skill set, and you say, well, we'll take the good with the bad. And he can move some. He's not Hendon Hooker. Obviously, he's not that. But to me, I wonder if that's the upside. That's the move that you need to make if you're Tennessee and you're hoping to maintain that top 10 level.
I also think, though, with Sam Hartman, and I think part of the reason that you throw, like, Notre Dame was thrown out immediately is just that, like, there's no competition. Like, Tyler Buckner doesn't scare Sam Hartman. Like, there's no one there. It's like the keys are absolutely Sam Hartman's. You're the best quarterback Notre Dame's had since, what are we going to say? Golson is like, just, is that I mean,
Oh, he's better than Golson.
He is better than Golson, but I'm saying, like, is he the best? Like, at least Golson won a lot of football games, and I think I mean, that's what I'm saying. So they'll take whatever they can get. If they can get Hartman in that regard, it's great. They don't have to do the Drew Pine experience anymore, or the Tyler Buckner is maybe figuring it out. Tennessee, he has to, like, I think one of the things that would scare these kind of quarterbacks who have like one final year is they're like, whenever I make a mistake, the Nico chants are coming. Like, if I struggle just a little bit, like, Nico is there. Like, there's a looming 5-star, best physical, talented quarterback, like the most talented quarterback Tennessee's had since Peyton Manning on campus. Like, I'm here. He is, like, you see videos all the time, people being like dapping up Nico. Like, even in Miami, like, they're just finding him out and just are excited. Like, there is so much. Like, I was in the stands when Joe Milton was overthrowing dudes in the pick game at home 2 years ago, and they're all just chanting Harrison Bailey because they were all convinced that Harrison Bailey was the guy.
I'm old enough to remember.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when Harrison Bailey was all that Tennessee was missing at the quarterback spot. And I just, as someone quite familiar with this fan base, I think there is going to be so much pressure on whoever is starting over Nico right away that I think a lot of these guys are like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. And it's the reality of the situation of just Nico is going to play. Like, I don't see a way Nico Iamaleava does not at least end the season starting for the Tennessee Volunteers. I think he's gonna find his way on the field.
He could. He definitely could. And that part that you bring up about having the true freshman that everybody wants to see, we've seen in recent memory how that absolutely can impact guys. Look at the situation in Oklahoma 2021 with Spencer Rattler, and obviously Caleb Williams is his backup this year. The way that Clemson fans just felt so much angst with DJ Uiagalelei, and knowing that Cade Klubnik, who Tennessee is going to see this weekend, was just waiting in the wings, and Clemson fans are just like, you got to get this guy in, you got to get this guy in. And I wonder how that impacted Florida's sell of a portal quarterback, and them ending up with Graham Mertz when you're like, really? That's it? Like, that's the best you could do. But it's like, all right, well, you've got Rashada, you've got the guy that everybody's talking about, this big NIL deal, and, you know, their high price ticket. And it's like, all right, it's a ticking time bomb. And I do wonder how much that impacts, you know, the Tennessee situation moving forward. And, you know, if they're just hoping that Milton can kind of be that in-between guy where, you know, maybe you get 4 or 5 good starts out of him. You give time for Nico to be able to gain some weight. Or, you know, we shouldn't dismiss Taven Jackson. We shouldn't necessarily assume that he's not going to be the guy. He's kind of the odd man out, understandably so. Right. Like, he's a little bit of like that, like, kind of Garrett Nussmeier type thing right now, where he's kind of like the in-between guy, and you kind of wait and see how that plays out. But yeah, there are a lot of very interesting variables at play for Tennessee. And, you know, who knows how that's impacted by the way that this weekend plays out with Joe Milton, his performance in the Orange Bowl.
I would love his player comp I remember on 247 was Jordan Love coming out of high school. And I was like, I wonder if he has the Jordan Love makeup. Can you back up whoever it is, Nico or Joe, for 4 years in college and then just go away as a grad transfer and ball out at like Utah State and get drafted? There you go. That's the plan, Taven, because I feel really good if he was able to do that. Because, like, in modern college football, Georgia fans don't understand this, I think, going into next year, where it's like they're assuming that it's going to be Carson Beck and then Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandagriff are all just going to be there. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think Vandagriff or Stockton's gone after spring ball. Whoever's number 3 in the depth chart is out. Like, no, they're gone. So, like, Tennessee is going to lose one of the 3. And let me tell you, it's not going to be Nico. That is one of the 3 not. So you're like, is it Joe if he looks like he's behind Nico, or even Taven in spring ball? Like, is it Joe that leaves? But I don't know. It will not be those 3 as the quarterbacks for the Tennessee Volunteers in the fall. You mentioned Graham Mertz. I want to end here, Connor. This was like an under the radar, like, disaster for the Gators, I think. Because I've said since Leary ended up at Kentucky, which is another example, I think, where it's like the keys are his. Like, Liam Cohen's coming back. He saw what Liam Cohen did with Will Levis 2 years ago. And it's like, oh, I mean, I have Kentucky. They're going to have a better record than Tennessee next year. Like, Kentucky's probably going to be a 10-win team next year. I'm really high on that. I love Devin Leary. Like, he is an exceptional player. And I think Kentucky's going to rebound in a strong way next year. Rich Gangarello not in the picture. Like, it's going to be a very different.
The doppelganger's back. We're good.
Yeah, the doppelganger's back. I think there's already so much pressure. 6 and 7 back-to-back years for the Gators. I think he has to win 8 games to, like, kind of appease, because you saw what Heupel did in year 2. A lot of coaches break through. Lane Kiffin broke through in year 2 at Ole Miss. I think with the portal and everything else, you were able to flip these teams way faster. You don't get the 3.